So we'll start by quick reading or quick preview of what we have completed already. So in the first part, we have started the chapter Reshaping India's Political Map, and we have learned that whenever we use the word medieval period, we are only referring to 11th to 17th century. So medieval means that in between two ages, and Europeans use this word medieval to refer to the period in between the fall of Roman Empire to the Renaissance. For them, it is from the Dark Age to modern science. But for us, whenever we are referring to medieval, we only simply mean 11th to 17th century. So the new era in India's history began in the 11th century, and it has started due to invasions. So invasions, usually the people who invade are called invaders, and those who have invaded India were mostly Central Asian, that is either they are Turkic or Afghan. So when we refer to Turkey, we mean it is either Turkey or Siberia. The purpose of invasions. So the main purpose of invasions is, the first is for the riches, for the wealth, for plundering the wealth, and the second is for their territorial ambitions or expansions of their rule, and the third and the most interesting one is for spreading their religion. So invasions used to happen even for the spreading of religion. So next, starting with the 13th century. So in the 13th century, we can see the beginning or the rise of the Delhi Sultanate. So Sultanate, in the sense, it is a territory which is ruled by Sultan. Sultan is referring to a Muslim head. Usually the Muslim kings refer themselves to be as sultans. So the territories which are ruled by Sultan is called the Sultanate. So how did the formation of the Delhi Sultanate start? So King Prithviraj Chauhan, who ruled over the northwestern parts of India. So King Prithviraj Chauhan had ruled over the northwestern parts of India, and he was defeated in this year, and this has given rise to the formation of the Delhi Sultanate. So in the Delhi Sultanate, primarily we can see 5 successive dynasties. The first is the Mamluk or the slaves, and next is the Khilji or Khalji. Both refer to the same thing, it's just the transcription errors. And next is Tughlaqs, Saids and Lodhis. And the city of New Delhi or Delhi has assumed a big role in the kingdoms then, because it was in central and most of it, the Delhi was the capital city. And no sultan's rule was more than 9 years. So we can say that there was political instability. There was a high political instability, and no ruler has ruled more than 9 years. And whenever one ruler had to precede or succeed for another, then there always used to be violent reactions. So whenever a second person has to take the throne, it was always in the violent way, and there was always political instability. And in the 14th century came the Alauddin Khilji. So he was always on military campaigns, and he has conquered the north and central India, and also he has repelled many of the Mongol forces. So Mongols were the ones who have most control, most parts of Asia. They had control on most parts of Asia, and they wanted to also invade India and add up to their expansions. But Alauddin Khilji has repelled the Mongolian forces as well, Mongol forces. And then came his slave general Malik Kafur, who has expanded towards the south as well. So Alauddin Khilji has expanded the north and central India, and his slave general Malik Kafur has expanded towards the south and also attacked Hindu centers, Sri Rangam, Madurai, Chidambaram and possibly Rameshwaram as well. You can remember these names. And then few decades later came Muhammad bin Tughlaq. So Way back in the Mauryan Empire, whole of India was under one ruler, and after many decades later, we can see that Muhammad bin Tughlaq, he had also been one ruler who ruled whole of India. So whole of India was ruled by one ruler once upon a time in the Mauryan Empire, and then it happened again for Muhammad bin Tughlaq. But this rule was very short-lived, so its duration was very less. And Muhammad bin Tughlaq was a very ambitious person, but his execution was very poor. So one of his ambitions were shifting of the capital. So he wanted to shift the capital from Delhi to Daulatabad, and he felt that Daulatabad was more central and it could help him to rule whole of India properly. But due to the shift, it has caused major loss of life, and people had to travel thousands of kilometers for them to come or shift from this place to this. So he again have to shift back to his original capital. And next, he has introduced token currency, that is, he had made cheap copper coins and gave them the value of gold and silver. But his idea was good, but the execution was poor, and many of the fake or counterfeit coins have started to flow in the market, and this has declined the economy. And so he had to revoke his token currency policy. And next, rulers or the sultans lived luxurious lives, and they had lived this luxurious life either by plundering the villagers or stealing the wealth from villages and cities, and also enslaved people, that is free labor. Either it was free labor or they used to sell people to other places. And next, they also levied jizya tax on non-Muslims to exempt them from military services. So this has in turn has made people to convert into Islam to get rid of this tax, because it was very heavy on people at that time. And at the end of 14th century came Timur, who was a brutal ruler, and he had most parts of Asia under his control, and he wanted to invade India from the northwestern side, and he had attacked Delhi, and he had his own reasons. His first reason was he wanted to do war, and his second reason was to plunder wealth from the people who are not in his religion. So that was his idea. He came to Delhi, he took all the wealth and left, only to leave chaos or damage in this place. And then came the entry of the Lodhis, and Lodhis had very less territory to rule upon. So starting it was a very large one, but due to invasions, internal conflicts and many more things, it started to decline, and finally for the Lodhis, very less territory was left for them to rule. Next is resistance to the Delhi Sultanate. So this Sultanate had most of the India under their control, but few parts were not under their control. So those were being studied here. The first one is Narasimha Deva I, who ruled over the present day Odisha and parts of West Bengal and Andhra Pradesh, and he has resisted the invasions of these rulers, and he did not let them invade his place. And to commemorate his efforts, the Konark Sun Temple was built. And next is the Hoysalas, who ruled over the southern parts, mostly Karnataka was under their rule, and they had also resisted to these invasions, but due to internal conflicts and war all the time, their economy has declined, and finally they were merged into the Vijayanagara Empire due to internal conflicts and also the decline of economy. Because always when they have to face wars and invasions, then they have to go on military campaigns, and this would cost a lot of money, due to which their economy has declined. And the next one was successfully resisted was Ranakumbha, who was a Rajput ruler and who ruled over the Mewar kingdom, which is in Rajasthan. he was successful in resisting the invasions. So we have studied until this part in the previous video. So now we'll start our video. Now we'll be starting with the Vijayanagara Empire. So when the Delhi Sultanate grew politically more unstable, a new center of power has emerged in the south. So when the Delhi Sultanate has grew to be more unstable, there were always wars and invasions and all these things, and then emerged a new center of power in the south. So in the 14th century, two brothers who were Harihara and Bukka, who had initially served as governors under the Muhammad bin Tughlaq. So these two had served as governors for Muhammad bin Tughlaq. We've already studied about them. He being very ambitious, but he was poor in execution. So he was Muhammad bin Tughlaq. So eventually rejected. So these both had eventually rejected the Delhi authority and established an independent kingdom that became a significant force in southern India and grew into the Vijayanagara Empire. So basically these both worked as governors under Muhammad bin Tughlaq, but they had rejected the Delhi's authority and made independent kingdoms which had become prominent and later became the Vijayanagara Empire. So to the north of the Vijayanagara Empire, the Bahmani Sultanates were a major rival. So we already studied about Bahmani Sultanates, who used to be the rivals for the original Delhi Sultanates. They were regional sultanates. One was the Bahmani. So to the north of the Vijayanagara Empire was the Bahmani Sultanate, was a major rival, and it eventually fragmented into 5 independent states called the Deccan Sultanates. So the Bahmani Sultanate had later become into 5 parts, 5 independent states, which were called the Deccan Sultanates. That is Bijapur, Golconda, Berar, Ahmednagar and Bidar, and each ruled by former governors or Tarafdars who declared autonomy. So each of these 5, Bijapur, Golconda, Bidar, Ahmednagar and Bidar, were ruled by former governors or Tarafdars who had declared their autonomy. And the Vijayanagara rulers battled with the first two as well as with the Gajapati rulers of Odisha in the east. So basically the Vijayanagara rulers who had ruled over this Vijayanagara Empire had wars with both states, that is both Bijapur and Golconda. They had wars with these two, plus with the Gajapati rulers of Odisha, which was in the east. So basically Vijayanagara was in the south and they had fought wars with those in Odisha and also with the people in the north, that is Bijapur and Golconda. Moving on. So the kingdoms in the Deccan and the Vijayanagara Empire. So this was the whole of Vijayanagara Empire, and we can see Bijapur and Golconda. These were the two with which they have fought wars, and they also fought wars with the Gajapati Empire as well, which was in parts of Odisha. This was the Gajapati Empire. So next we'll study about Krishna Devaraya. So in the 16th century, the Vijayanagara Empire reached its peak under its celebrated ruler Krishna Devaraya, who expanded and secured the empire's dominance over the Deccan. So basically the Vijayanagara Empire was basically formed by both brothers Harihara and Bukka, and it has reached the full of its glory under the ruler Krishna Devaraya, who had expanded and secured the empire's dominance over the Deccan region, that is the central part of India. So under his rule, the empire achieved both military power and cultural renaissance. So under his rule, it has grown culturally as well. And he patronized poets and scholars in Sanskrit, Telugu, and Kannada, and he himself has composed an epic poem in Telugu, that is Malyada, on the story of Tamil poet Saint Andal. One section of the work is Rajhanti, the royal policy, where he expounded his ideas on good governance. So he had made the state rich culturally as well, and he used to celebrate poets, and he himself has composed an epic poem in Telugu which is called Malyada, on the story of a Tamil poet Saint Andal. And one section of the work is Rajaniti, that is royal policy, the policy which is followed by the royals, where he had explained about his ideas on good governance, how to rule the kingdom for the welfare of the people. And Krishna Deva Raya provided grants to many temples, including Tirupati in Andhra Pradesh and Vittala temple in his own capital Vijayanagara. Vittala we all know, and Tirupati in Andhra Pradesh are two most famous temples, and he also provided grants to these temples, which displayed many grand temples, palaces, and other buildings. So he had made his state rich culturally as well and expanded the kingdom. So after winning many wars against his neighbors, Krishna Deva Raya died of illness in this year 1529. And in 1565, the Deccan Sultanates formed a coalition and defeated the Vijayanagara forces led by Rama Raya. So basically, Krishna Deva Raya has died of illness in 1529, and in 1565, the Deccan Sultanates formed a coalition. So you have seen that 5 states. So basically there was Bahmani Sultanate, and they were divided into 5 states, and these were called the Deccan Sultanates, and they have formed a coalition and defeated the Vijayanagara forces, which were led by Rama Raya. So Krishna Deva Raya has died in 1529, and in 1565, which Vijayanagara Empire, which is led by Rama Raya, has been defeated by the Deccan Sultanates, who have formed a coalition or alliance in between themselves. And Krishna Deva Raya's son-in-law at the Battle of Thalikota. So this battle was called the Battle of Thalikota. So after this, the city was sacked over several months. Houses, shops, buildings, palaces, and most of its temples were destroyed, and much of its civilian population was massacred, that is killed, and it was left in ruins. And after this, the empire got fragmented into smaller regions. So basically, the empire was very vast, and after the invasions, it was fragmented into many parts, and it was ruled by Nayakas, who were the former military governors, and the empire came to an end in the mid 17th century. So the empire has come into the end in the mid 17th century after a great loss to life and property. So with this, we have completed about the Delhi Sultanate and as well as the Vijayanagara Empire. Now we'll be starting with the Mughals. So when the Delhi Sultanate weakened, Babur, who was a Turkic Mongol ruler and a military strategist who had been thrown out of Samarkand, modern day Uzbekistan, has turned his sights to India. So now we'll be starting with the Mughals. So first we have to speak about Babur, who was a Turkic Mongol ruler and he was a military strategist, and he has been thrown out of Samarkand Samarkand, which is the modern day Uzbekistan, and he had seen India, and a descendant of Timur. So this Babur was the descendant of Timur. We already studied about Timur, who was a brutal leader. He had came, invaded India and plundered the wealth and left. So Babur had defeated Ibrahim Lodi at Panipat in 1526. So we have seen that the dynasty in the Delhi Sultanates were the Lodis, and Babur has defeated Ibrahim Lodi in Panipat in 1526. So Babur defeated Lodis in the 1526, which will later be called the first battle of Panipat. So this was called the first battle of Panipat. So this will later be known as the first battle of Panipat. They have fought that war in a place called Panipat, and therefore it is called the first war of, or the first battle of Panipat. And it relied heavily on gunpowder, field artillery, and matchlock guns, which had been recently introduced in warfare in India. So previously in India, we used to not have gunpowder, field artillery, and all these things because there were only bows, arrows, knives, and all those things. But these new introductions have been made in the first battle of Panipat, which was introduced in the warfare in India. And that defeat put a final end to the great Delhi Sultanate. So the 5 dynasties rule of the Delhi Sultanate had come to an end and laid the foundations for the Mughal empires. As Babur assumed the throne of the Delhi, as Babur assumed control of the Delhi throne, then it has gave rise to the formation of the Mughal Empire. Moving on, after Babur's death in 1530, so he had fought the Battle of Panipat in 1526, and Babur has died in 1530. And then came his son Humayun, who struggled to hold the empire together. So basically, the first Mughal emperor was Babur, and his son is Humayun, who had to go through a lot of struggles to hold the empire. It was not easy for him to go on to his father's place. And taking advantage of this, Sher Shah Suri, a powerful Afghan leader, established the Sur Empire over large parts of North India and introduced many lasting reforms. But the empire was short-lived, however, as Humayun soon reconquered the lost ground. So basically, after Babur's death, seeing that Humayun was struggling to hold the power together, there was the entry of Sher Shah Suri, who was an Afghan leader who has established the Sur Empire. Sur Empire over large parts of northern India, North India. But even though he was ruling large parts of North India, but his empire was very short-lived. His duration was very less. And again, Humayun has captured the control of the lost ground, which was acquired by his father. And before this happened, Hemu, a skilled military commander and chief minister, Wazir, under one of the last Suri leaders, captured Delhi and ruled it briefly under the royal name of Hemachandra Vikramaditya. So before Humayun could actually take the lost ground, there was a person called Hemu, who was a skilled military commander and chief minister under one of the Suri leaders. So under one of this Sur Empire, he was a chief minister and a military commander, and he has captured the Delhi and ruled it briefly under the royal name Hemachandra Vikramaditya. So he has named himself to be Hemachandra Vikramaditya, and he had ruled for some years. And though enjoying some military successes, he was injured on the battlefield, that is the second battle of Panipat, when confronted by Babur's grandson, who was Akbar. So even though he was ruling the empire for a short period of time, even though he had good military successes, but he was injured in the battlefield of second battle of Panipat. So the first battle was fought between Babur and Ibrahim Lodi, and the second battle of Panipat, where we have the Hemachandra Vikramaditya, who had confronted Babur's grandson, who was Akbar. So the second battle of Panipat, Akbar was there, who was the grandson, Babur's grandson, in the sense Humayun's son, and captured him, was brought to Akbar, who had him beheaded. And Akbar soon reclaimed Delhi for the Mughals. So for a brief period of time, the Delhi was not under the control of Mughals. But after the second battle of Panipat, Akbar has captured Hemachandra Vikramaditya, and when he was brought before Akbar, he had him beheaded and or killed, and Akbar soon reclaimed the Delhi to be Mughals. So now comes the Akbar's empire. So first Mughal leader was Babur, and the next person was Humayun, who has struggled a bit to capture or take control of his father's land, and then after Humayun came Akbar, who was Babur's grandson. Akbar was declared emperor at the age of 13 upon his father Humayun's accidental death. Akbar set out to bring the entire subcontinent under the Mughal control. So basically, first was Babur, and next Humayun had struggled to gain control, but he had done some part, and then Akbar, who was claimed to be declared to be the emperor at the age of 13. At a very young age, he was declared to be the emperor, and he had took up the responsibility to bring the entire subcontinent under the Mughal control. So there was Humayun's accidental death, and therefore Akbar was declared to be the emperor. And his reign was blend of brutality, tolerance, and shaped by ambition and strategy. So even though his reign was a blend of brutality, it was also shaped by ambition and strategy. So even though he was brutal, but he was very ambitious and a strategist person. And in early conquests, following many of his predecessors, examples, he showed no mercy at the Fort Chittor or Chittorgarh in Rajasthan, which he besieged for more than 5 months in the face of the determined resistance from the Rajput soldiers. And they inflicted heavy losses on the Mughal army, but the fort finally breached and died fighting in large numbers, while hundreds of women committed Johar. And Akbar ordered the massacre of some 30,000 civilians, and the surviving women and children were enslaved. So like his predecessors, even Akbar was also a brutal leader, and he had shown no mercy. In one such examples was Fort Chittor, which was of Chittorgarh in Rajasthan. So he had basically captured or kept his armed forces around the fort for about more than 5 months, and even though he has faced determined resistance from the Rajput soldiers. So even though whose court it was originally, even though they have resisted, he had placed his armed forces. Placing armed forces around anything is called besieged for more than 5 months, and even though it has caused heavy losses for the Mughals, because having the military camps for such a long period at one place would cost a lot, and even though it was very expensive, but the fort finally breached and died fighting in large numbers, while hundreds of women committed Johar. What is Johar? So when invading Turkic or Mongol armies conquered a territory, they often took the women as slaves or abused them. And there are historical examples of Rajput women jumping into mass fires to avoid being captured and enslaved. This Johar was considered a heroic act of final resistance and means of preserving one's honor. And thus, when Akbar finally broke into the Chittorgarh fort, hundreds of Rajput women, led by their queens and noble women, have committed Johar. So basically, when the Mughals or the Turkic armies invaded any territory, they'll take the women in that as slaves or used to abuse them. So to avoid that, to preserve their honor, they used to commit the Johar. So we have all seen this in the film called Padmavat. One such example, you can just remember like that. And next, Akbar ordered this massacre of some 30,000 civilians, and the surviving women and children were enslaved. Enslaved in the sense either they are used as free labor or they are sold elsewhere for any other place. This was one such example of showing that he used to follow his predecessor's path. And Akbar was at 25 at that time, and he sent a message of victory which read, "We have succeeded in occupying a number of forts and towns belonging to the infidels, that is, the people who are not their religion, and have established Islam there. With the help of our bloodthirsty sword, we have erased the signs of infidelity from their minds and have destroyed temples in those places and also all over the Hindustan." So in one of his, he sent a message of victory which has read as follows, that we have successfully captured the forts and towns belonging to those who are not Muslims, and as well we have established Islam there, and we made them understand the and also erased the signs of infidelity from their minds, and have destroyed the temples in those places and also all over Hindustan. At that time, India was called to be as Hindustan by the Mughals. So Akbar followed his predecessors in this thought of his. A monarch could be ever intent of conquest, otherwise his enemies rise in arms against him. So monarch should be ever intent on conquest. Intent in the sense he should be prepared on conquest, otherwise his enemies might raise arms against him. And as his empire grew, he increasingly used political strategies to stabilize them. So you've already read in the starting itself that he was ambitious and also strategist. And he entered into marriage alliances with princes or neighboring kingdoms, welcomed Rajput and regional leaders into his court and abolished the jizya. So he was a perfect strategist, and therefore he has also made marriage alliances with the Rajput kingdoms and welcomed the Rajput and regional leaders into his court, and also abolished the jizya tax. So we've already known that it was the tax which was imposed on non-Muslims, and it has promoted the conversion of Islam and promoted the doctrine of sulh-e-kul, literally the peace with all. So he has also promoted the idea of peace with all, or the tolerance of all faiths. Through interfaith dialogues, appointment of Hindu officials in high positions, and other bold reforms, Akbar expanded and stabilized his empire, even gaining the support of many Rajput rulers. So he has used his strategy to win the faith of Rajput rulers and the people as well, by taking some bold reforms and encouraging interfaiths and appointing Hindu officials in his court or in high positions. In this way, he has expanded his empire. And his court historian and biographer Abdul Faz recorded him as stating, "Formerly I persecuted men into conformity with my faith and deemed it Islam. And as I grew in knowledge, I was overwhelmed with shame, not being a Muslim myself. It was unmet, inappropriate to force others to become such. What constancy is to be expected from proselytes, converted people on compulsion?" So one of his court person or court historian and biographer Abdul Fazl as recorded that of Akbar saying that I was not proper in my ideology when I was young, and I forced people to convert into Islam, and I was not able to encourage the interfaith and respecting all faiths. What would you expect from a person who is forcefully converted into Islam? So in this way, this was his recorded statement. And his long reign lasted almost 50 years, that is from 1556 until his death, that is in 1605. So his was a very long rule. So we have seen that Delhi Sultanate, so no rule was happening more than 4 years. No one has ruled that land for more than 9 years. But we can see that in the Akbar's time, he was almost ruling for 50 years, which was a very long period. And while its middle period was relatively peaceful, the final 15 years involved fresh military campaigns in Kashmir, Sindh, Deccan, and Afghanistan. So even though the starting was painful, the middle period was peaceful, but at the end it has again become like fresh military campaigns in Kashmir, Sindh, Deccan, and Afghanistan. So even though being illiterate, Akbar has been keen to explore the Persian and Indian scripts and showed great interest in classical Indian thought and often invited scholars to his court. Even though he was illiterate, even though he was made empire at the age of 13, he was very keen in studying to explore the Persian and Indian scriptures, and also showed interest in classical Indian thought and often invited scholars to his court. So he was interested in learning, and he established a house of translation at Fatehpur Sikri, where he had major Sanskrit scripts translated into Persian, including the Mahabharata and Ramayana and Bhagavad Gita and Panchtantra. So he has also made the house of translation at Fatehpur Sikri and translated many of them into Persian, many of Sanskrit scriptures into Persian. Some examples are the Mahabharata, Ramayana, Bhagavad Gita, and Panchtantra. And Akbar's son Jahangir. So until now we have studied about Akbar. Now moving on to Akbar's son, who was Jahangir. Shared with his father a love for art and architecture and tried to expand the empire into Deccan. And his son Shah Jahan fought several rebellions and best remembered as the builder of Taj Mahal at Agra. So after Akbar, his son Jahangir had shared with his father a love of art and architecture. So he was also interested in architecture, art, and tried to expand the empire towards the Deccan side as well. That is the central part of India. And then came Jahangir's son, who was Shah Jahan, whom we all very well know to be the builder of the Taj Mahal at Agra. So the Taj Mahal is even today recognized as one of the greatest architectural marvels of the world. We all know that. And this period formed the peak of an immense flowering of art and architecture. So same, even Akbar, Jahangir also showed their interest in art and architecture, and the love for it has peaked in the Mughal rule under the rule of Shah Jahan, and which included the building of Humayun's tomb in Delhi and the Red Forts in Delhi and Agra. So famous places are the Humayun tomb and the Red Fort and all these things. And other classical arts and music of India also flourished during this period, as also remarkable works of the calligraphy and miniature paintings. So calligraphy and miniature paintings were also followed during this duration of time. So this was a miniature painting illustrating the partial translation of Ramayana and depicting the well-known episode of Rama chasing the golden deer. So this is a miniature painting which flourished at that particular years. Next comes the Aurangzeb. So we mentioned earlier the frequent violent successions during the Sultanate period, and this was repeated during the succession of Shah Jahan. So we have studied that in the Delhi Sultanate, there was no smooth transition from one ruler to another. It was all went in the violent ways, and this has repeated in the transition from Shah Jahan to Aurangzeb as well, who fell ill in the year 1657. So Shah Jahan has fell ill in the year 1657, and he wished the throne to go to Dara Sikho, his eldest son. So Shah Jahan has thought of his throne going to Dara Sikho, who was his eldest son. But Dara's younger brother Aurangzeb defeated him in a series of battles and eventually executed him. So Dara's younger brother, who was Aurangzeb, has fought wars or battles with Dara Sikho and eventually executed, that is, killed Dara Sikho, and presenting his severed head to their father. So Shah Jahan, who was ill, thought of giving the kingdom to Dara Sikho, but Aurangzeb fought battles with Dara Sikho and executed him and took his head to Shah Jahan. And Aurangzeb also removed his two other brothers. He had one arrested and executed, and drove the other into exile. So he had two other brothers as well, who one was killed and the second person was exiled, that is sent to faraway place. And to prevent further challenge in his rule, Aurangzeb was also imprisoned his father Shah Jahan in the Agra fort. So even he wanted no competition in the empire, or nobody has to challenge his rule. So Aurangzeb was also imprisoned his own father, who was Shah Jahan, in the Agra fort, and where he remained until his death. And Aurangzeb crowned himself as emperor in the year 1658 and named himself Alamgir, or the conqueror of the world. So he has changed his name from Aurangzeb to Alamgir, which means that he's a conqueror of the world. And he ruled for almost 49 years. Even his rule was very long. That is, Aurangzeb has ruled for 49 years from 1658. He has crowned himself in the year 1658. And Aurangzeb was skilled in military matters and conducted many campaigns conquering parts of south in particular. So he mainly focused in the south. And under his rule, the Mughal Empire reached its greatest expansion. So under the rule of Aurangzeb, the Mughal Empire was very vast, and though constantly faced with significant rebellions, some of which we will turn in the next section. So we will be studying about some significant rebellions in the next section. And Aurangzeb has spent the last 25 years of his life fighting war after war in the Deccan. So he has spent last 25 years of his life in fighting war after war to gain control of the Deccan due to the increasing rebellions. And maintaining large armies for those campaigns depleted the empire's treasury and a great strain on the administration. So obviously when you're going for wars and maintaining military campaigns, it will drain the wealth. And indeed, this is often considered one of the key factors in the rapid decline of Mughal power after Aurangzeb's death in 1707. So after Aurangzeb's death, due to the wars and economic decline, and that has led to the decline of the Mughal power itself after Aurangzeb's death in the year 1707. So he has acquired the throne in the year 1658 and he has died in the year 1707, and he had ruled for 49 years. So Aurangzeb, who belonged to Islam's Sunni sect, was deeply religious and he led an austere life, and unlike Akbar, observed all religious rituals and occasions. So he was very deeply religious, and unlike Akbar, he observed all the religious rituals and occasions, and he gradually banned the practices he regarded as non-Islamic, such as music and dance in his court, and reimposed the Zigya tax on the non-Muslims, as well as the pilgrimage taxes on Hindus traveling to their sacred places, both of which had been abolished by Akbar. So Akbar had thought of maintaining peace, he has realized, and abolished the Zigya tax and the pilgrimage tax on Hindus. So if Hindus had to travel to their sacred places to visit the temples or anything which is religious to them, they had to pay the pilgrimage tax, which was abolished by Akbar, but again it was introduced by Aurangzeb. And he has also banned practices which he thought to be un-Islamic, such as music and dance in his court. And some scholars argue that Aurangzeb's motives were primarily political, that is, to establish and strengthen his empire's dominance. So some of them were thinking that there was no personal agenda, he was only thinking of making his empire dominant. And they also gave examples of grants and assurances of protection he gave to some temples. So whatever Aurangzeb has done to establish his empire's dominance. That was what the scholars say, by saying and giving examples that he has assured the protection of some of the temples as well. While politics did play a part in his ideas, Aurangzeb's own firemen make his personal religious motive clear too. In 1669, for instance, he ordered governors of all the provinces to demolish schools and temples of the infidels and put down their teachings and religious practices. So in contrast to what these scholars had to claim, in 1669, Aurangzeb has ordered that all the schools and temples of infidels, that is the people not in his religion, to be abolished, and that the teachings and religious practices should be put down. And the temples at Benares, that is present day Varanasi, Mathura, Somnath, among many others, were destroyed, as well as Jain temples and Sikh gurudwaras. And this aspect of Aurangzeb was also visible in his persecution of Muslims of other sects, including Sufis or the Zoroastrians, the religion of Parsis in India, originally from Persia. So he was even forceful in his ideologies on other sects of Muslims as well, including the Sufis and the Muslims who were from the originally from Persia, who were from other sects, not the sectors of Aurangzeb. Even his rules were harsh on them as well. So this has clearly shown his religious motto, not just to show his empire's dominance. So now, with this, we have completed the main emperors of the Mughals. That is starting from Babur until Aurangzeb, who had died in the year 1707. So now, resistance to the Mughals. So let us survey some of the major rebellions that ended up eroding the Mughal power, keeping the special case of Marathas for the next chapter. So we'll be dealing with most of the things in this chapter, but we'll be leaving the Marathas for the next chapter. So over the centuries, many peasant communities rebelled against a harsh exploitation, and one such case is in the 17th century. So most of the peasant groups, that is the people's communities, have rebelled, and one such case was in the 17th century, involves the Jat, that is the Jat peasantry, that is in the present day western Uttar Pradesh, Haryana and eastern Rajasthan, who managed to kill an oppressive officer of the Mughal administration. So these people who were from the Jat peasantry have managed to kill a Mughal officer from the Mughal administration. And in a subsequent battle, 20,000 men confronted the Mughal army and fought valiantly, that is violently, but their Jat leader was killed and the rebellion was suppressed. So one such great rebellion had happened in 17th century, where it involves the Jat peasantry, which is in the present day western Uttar Pradesh, Haryana and eastern Rajasthan, and who have managed to kill the officer of Mughal administration, and also they had fought or confronted 20,000 men of the Mughal army and fought bravely, valiantly. This is bravely, but their rebellion was suppressed when their leader was killed, and then this has suppressed their rebellion. So one such great rebellion had happened in 17th century, and many tribal groups, that is the Bills, the Gonds, Santals and Kochas for instance, have also fought back against the attempts to annex their territory or imposed the taxes on them. While some of these groups were subdued or gradually integrated into the Delhi Sultanate or the Mughal Empire, others, especially those inhabiting forested, hilly or remote regions, managed to maintain some degree of independence. So even there came a huge resistance from the tribal groups, that is Bills, Gonds, Santals and Kochas. They have fought when they tried to annex or snatch their territories or impose taxes on them. So all of them stayed united and confronted the Delhi Sultanate or the Mughal Empire. While some had been suppressed and mixed up into the empires, but some were able to keep some degree of independence by fighting. So one such great leader was Rani Durgavati, is remembered as a violent queen of Garga Empire, one of the Gond kingdoms in central India. From all accounts, she ruled wisely and made her kingdom prosperous in the sense rich. And she kept an army of 20,000 soldiers and 1,000 elephants, with which she repelled several attempted invasions. And when a general sent by Akbar attacked her kingdom in the year 1564, even though being outnumbered and outmatched in weaponry, that is, their weapons were not any match for that of the Mughals, but she led her troops and fought bravely, ferociously. Wounded, she took her own life on the battlefield to avoid capture. So she didn't wanted to get captured. So she herself has ended her life on the battlefield, and she was only 40. And her sacrifice became a symbol of regional pride and resistance, and she is still revered as a heroic figure in Indian history. So whoever has fought against the invasions bravely, they are always celebrated, and one such is Rani Durgavati, who was a very violent queen of Garha kingdom, which is one of the Gond kingdoms in central India. So with this, you have completed the part, that is the resistance to the Mughals, and the next part will be starting with the surge of the Rajputs, and we'll be seeing the summary of this part in the next video as well.